wow, eventually they say, wow, I had an out of body experience. It's real. So person B says to person C the same thing, same conversation. You go all the way down to person Z. At what point does anecdotal evidence have enough people that have been there and done that that it becomes kind of a peer review? Because I've also seen peer reviewed studies when the lockdowns first hit, and then even a couple of years later, I read a book just within the last year that cited peer reviewed papers. And it seems to me that there has been a lot of formalized research done on astral projection or out of body experiences, as well as and especially near death experiences. So I'm just wondering, when does anecdotal evidence become a peer reviewed concept that's verified?
Yeah, so I've read some of these papers. There is a parapsychology journal that these papers get published in. Even like the president of the journal, I think like thinks a lot of the papers like lack like evidential, like they're not rigorous enough. But regardless of the facts, so I would say that it's based upon a novel prediction, so and that you can test. So if you could say like out of body experiences have multiple possible causes, how do you isolate all those different possible causes? So because there's lots of valid hypotheses for people's experiences of out of body experiences. You could say, well, there is such a thing like a soul that leaves the body. How do we know that's what's actually happening? There are things where people hallucinate. How do we know if they're hallucinating or not? How do we know they're not being self-deceptive or not? So
Or just
that's the
dreaming?
problem.
That's the thing. And I fully understand and appreciate that, because like when it first started happening to me, I thought, no, no, this is baloney. I could just be dreaming. And the idea that it could just be a hallucination or something of that nature, like a very, very lucid dream, was well within the possibility. I was very much atheist at that point, and it's kind of the thing that kind of brought me to that. Wow, there is something to this existence that we can't see, that isn't discernible by our physical senses. For me, in the study that I wrote and the books that I read, they just said, take a deck of cards, shuffle it up, cut the deck, but don't look at it. And then when you have the out of body experience, look at what card's facing up. When you go back in, write it down, and then verify it. And if you saw the correct card at the top of the stack, that would verify it. And that was actually the test that was cited in the paper that I read. The book was based on such a paper. It was I think it was written in 2021, something like that. The study was done just as the lockdowns occurred, because apparently no one really had anything else to do. But even the first time I look and it's the card that's on top, I think, okay, that could just be a coincidence, one out of 52. But the third, the fourth, the fifth time I can see the card on top, I can't help but think that this really is me in this real world that was out of my body, because I only entered that room through the wall, and like, I floated through the wall kind of a thing. And
Yeah.
so I'm in the place where I feel that it's definitely verifiable, and you can discard that as anecdotal evidence, but I'm kind of in a spot where I can't reject my own personal experience at this point, because I've verified it time and time again.
Well, I don't reject people's anecdotal personal experiences as potential justification for their own belief in their claim. I don't think you're like, I don't believe you're justified like as making a claim to knowledge, but I can understand like how people are moved. It'd be like you could have a false belief that your spouse loves you, right? But because of the way she acts and stuff like that, you believe she loves you, but it could be wrong. I'm not going to reject that. Now I know this is sort of a different domain. Like you could like maybe do an MRI or something and test to see if your spouse actually loves you. I don't think there's any way to test these other claims you're making. It's sort of anecdotal evidence, and I'm not saying it's not evidence, and I'm not saying it's not true. I'm saying I'm not justified in believing that it's true. But I do want to get
Well,
on the debate topic, though, on the topic of the show.
sure,
But
sure, because
go
that's
ahead.
that's kind of what I was trying to tie it to, is epistemologically, is kind of like it's verified, and you can follow this method, and as I understand it, there are different methods to get there, and that's kind of what I was trying to get at. Well, I granted we went on a little bit of a tangent there, but I feel that the very nature of a person's relationship with spirit is personal, and so to create like an impersonal verification as the center of the debate point, I feel is a bit of a folly. Like I guess I
Well,
don't know.
well,
Like
that's the
debate is
problem, though.
a misnomer.
Do you think atheists can be justified in believing that gods don't exist?
Uh, yeah, well, I was an atheist, and I remember
Okay.
feeling quite justified in it. And then what happened to me was somebody said, and it sounds silly, and I've had this conversation before, but what happened to me was somebody said, first you have to have faith, and then your faith is rewarded. And I was kind of like, oh come on, like if you believe in the tooth fairy, then the tooth fairy exists. Like that's kind of putting the cart behind the in front of the horse, kind of a thing. And I thought it was
Yeah.
kind of silly, but then just for kind of shits and giggles, I gave it a try, and I read the book, and I tried it out. The book that I read is called Astral Dynamics, and
Okay.
I can get the author for you if you're interested. It's right
I but I
here in
would
my
hey,
hand. Kurt
can we
Wolff.
have a show on this specific topic? Because I do want to create like a weekly
Hey,
show. I'm trying to get people to do it.
it's your
But
channel. You can do what you want, man. I'd
I
be
want to
happy to
do that.
support you. I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. But I want to move on
Yeah,
with this.
I'm all for it.
I have another short clip of Steve McRae, and then we're going to go to Rob Groin.
And millions of extant species on the planet. What accounts for this? What is the explanation? And he devised a theory on that now is known as the modern evolutionary synthesis combined with descent with modification. And that theory explains biodiversity. So when somebody says like Taylor had mentioned, evolution has never been proven, no scientific theory is ever proven. So that was what we call, that's called a fallacy. That's called ignorante elici. It's actually the name of that fallacy. It means what you said is true, but it's not of importance because no scientific theory is ever proven, because that's not the job of science. That's the job of logic and maths.
Yeah, I agree with Siggy here in support of my previous statement. If you tell me what God you believe in, I can tell you, and thank you for the 5,000 Argentina pesos super chat. If you tell me what God you believe in, I can tell you why it doesn't exist unless you define your God as undefinable. As long as you define your God, I can tell you why it doesn't exist. Like the God of all three monotheistic religions definitely doesn't exist. Also, Steve McRae is a transphobe, and that is a common sentiment, especially on Twitter. If Steve McRae, I'm aware of his arguments. I don't agree with his arguments. I actually argue with him all the time about his position on LGBT issues. Siggy. So yes, like I don't know if he's a transphobe per se, but yes, I think his positions on trans issues is problematic. But that's my personal opinion. I think I can justify it though, epistemologically justify it. Anyways, so that was him like saying like evolution is science, like we don't make claims for science. I'm just trying to show you like the tactics that Steve McRae, like his pace and stuff like that, how he has these conversations. But I do want to go, science does not prove things exactly. But I do want to go to Rob Groin. So, and then we'll talk about that. Yes, I
Can we see a video on Rob?
Yes, I'm going to show it right now. That's people sending super chats and stuff.
Atheism is the epitome of logical stupidity and logical absurdity. No, now I want to make something very clear here before I continue with it. I am saying that atheism is the epitome of stupidity and absurdity, not that atheists are. I'm not saying atheists are stupid or absurd, but I'm saying that atheism itself, the position of atheism, is stupid and absurd. And atheists are fools, according to Psalm 14:1. So again, it's not me that's calling atheists fools, it's the Word of God, God Himself. If you're an atheist, the Bible calls you a fool. And I happen to agree with what the Bible says. So if you're an atheist, I want you to know right now, you're a fool. You're a fool for believing that all this is not the work of a magnificent, intelligent designer. If you can look at the stars, a tree, a flower.
Look at the stars, the trees, the flowers.
I'm sure you guys all noticed this, but the hilariousness of I'm not calling atheists stupid, and then he totally calls them stupid. The Bible says you're stupid. I agree with the Bible that you're stupid. You're all stupid. It's like, wait, what was the whole like you're not all stupid thing at the beginning? Like you totally just absolutely said it in like most clear terms possible. It was hilarious. He like needed to rewatch that before he posted it.
Yeah, like. Yeah, but I like want to show like the difference between the two. Like, so you look at like how Steve argues in his debates and now how Rob Groin argues. But what anybody else have any other comments about that?
I mean, Dr. J took it right out of my mouth. I would have said the same thing. That's what I was laughing at. It's certainly not something I agree with. I was always told that atheism is first required to have faith because one has to question their faith. In fact, one of the I guess it was a full-blown sermon was they talked about Jesus on the cross, kind of did like a, what's up, God? What's going on? And so the whole point was that Jesus himself actually questioned his faith, and that's a very human experience. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so for a Christian to say this book says that atheism is foolish, but also for, I guess, the Christians in my community to say that questioning one's faith is perfectly acceptable. In fact, Jesus himself did it while he was kind of nailed up there. I think it kind of goes against their own lessons, and it's more of the same from the communities of Christianity that I thoroughly disagree with.
Yeah, I was trying to debate Rob. Like he kept making these Twitter posts and stuff like that. And I said, no, that's not what atheism is. That's not what atheism believes. Like that's like, I'll debate you. Like he's making all these insults against atheists and stuff. Like, and trying to get people to debate him. And then he blocks me. He blocks me, but he accepts Steve McRae's debate. Steve's going to crush him in this debate. But anyways.
Yeah. Sorry, Ozian. I agree with, just on those two videos, which isn't enough, but the experience of debating looks like Steve's gonna be good, right? Like this reminds me of the Witsit situation where if you're not ready, you're gonna be in trouble, and Rob might be in trouble here.
The problem Steve has is he gets pedantic and in the weeds sometimes, where he's like maybe not well understood by some people, sort of like Witsit in the way. But I say Steve's much better at breaking down concepts than Witsit is, because Steve is educated.
But Witsit, I think him being pedantic sometimes helps him. If he's losing on the science, which I guess we agree on that. But then you just say a bunch of confusing things and you sound smart. Whereas if you think Steve's right, then being as clear as possible is super important, right? You want to be very, very clear.
Yeah, Kentucky atheists, the current apologist trend on Twitter is to attack atheism rather than defend their position. Yes, it's like they're trying to emulate a hyper-skeptic position towards atheism instead of like supporting their claim. Like people are all emulating each other as skeptics. Well, you just need to prove your position's true. Like instead of actually arguing for their position, their worldview. That's why, like in this arena, I appreciate people like Steve who actually will argue for a worldview or why a worldview is justified or not. But do you have any response there, Issa?
I
think Issa's ordering lunch. That's what I'm going to guess. How does that sound, Issa?
That's funny. I find that his position was not appealing at all. I think that was ridiculous. What he said, I'm like, is anybody going to take what you're saying seriously? You know what I mean? Like, you can't have a fair interlocutorship if you're just going to call your opponent stupid. So I hope he doesn't take that strategy. I hope it's a little bit more nuanced.
Yeah, Daryl Frost, like, he's talking about Steve's. I mean, Steve's coming on the after show, so you can let him know too in the after show. But he has his projection where, like, he has to be right, and he comes off that way, especially on Twitter, and like instead of being more engaging. I understand like why he thinks he's doing it. I don't agree with that style, but
don't you think Twitter is just like the worst possible format if you want to think charitably about someone? You know, everything's such short form. It's just, I don't know. I just feel like it's a not very charitable place. Just the format alone doesn't allow it very well.
Unless you pay $10 a month or something, then you can write books. I do have another video clip of Rob Groin, and this is sort of contrasting this. So, like, I showed an argument. So Steve gave a justification for atheism. Rob gave a justification why atheism is stupid. I think it seems like we all agree which one is more convincing. And so and then Steve gave an argument for science and evolution and stuff like that. And this is Rob's position.
DNA is literally coded instruction. Now, coding, last time I checked, requires someone to write it. So if there's coded information in my body and yours, and there is, then someone must have written that code. Okay, fourth argument, irreducible complexity in cells. Now, the smaller a cell gets, the more complex it becomes, irreducibly so.
Anyways, so like Steve understands evolution too, and Kentucky Atheist, yes, philosophy bros. I like philosophy though, but I like communication theory too. Like, so I like to be able to communicate to people within the domain that they engage in. So I change depending on who I'm talking to a little bit. Like, not who I am, but the way I approach them, I try to change. Anyways, what do you think about his argument against evolution?
Teleological argument or whatever, or design, irreducible complexity. I think we've heard these 100 times. So I'm not surprised to hear those. Those were provided in a very simple way. I think other people have, provided those arguments more eloquently, but he kind of provided a kind of stripped down version of them.
Yeah, and that was like his big, it's like a 9-minute video overall. I took 2 pieces out of it. But yeah, like as Siggy says, so the third argument is basically a misrepresentation of evolution wrapped in equivocation. Definitely equivocation. So he's like, oh, there's code. First of all, we call it code because that's the language we use. Like, we don't have to call it code. We could just call it friggin' flesh or whatever DNA is made of. Like, somebody here knows. I don't know. And then just because it looks like how we would code something on a computer, I mean, not really, sort of. There must be a coder. So it's an equivocation fallacy. You're like, it's just like a dishonest tactic to me, anyways. Just trying to use language to confuse people. And then irreducible complexity. Like, that's another argument intelligent design proponents say, is that you can't reduce biological things to non-biological things. So there must be a creator to create that biological thing or to guide like the evolutionary process. But we see examples of this. Like, we have different parts of our body that we don't use. What do we call that? Like our
I totally know what you're talking about, appendix, and
yeah.
Yep. I forget what that's.
Somebody can
but to
tell
say
us.
that biological thing can't be reduced down to a non-biological thing, like, how isn't that exactly what a fossil is? It was biological and now it's just a rock.
Well,
like bones. I don't.
Yeah.
Oh, before I get too far, I should say I got an alert. Somebody gifted me a channel membership, so I very thoroughly thank that person. I don't know who it was because I can't see
Siggy.
the YouTube chat. Oh, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate that. But yeah, I can't see the YouTube chat because I'm in the StreamYard on my phone here. But I just thought I'd throw out a big thank you.
Hugh Human spelled it right, vestigial. So irreducible means I cannot explain it by the smallest thing. So, like, can you explain wetness, like of water, by building a deductive argument based upon hydrogen and oxygen? Can you build an argument to explain why water is wet based upon that? So we would call some properties to be emergent properties, and so irreducible complexity is sort of like this, the opposite side of that, saying we can't reduce it down to the thing. Where like emergent properties saying we can't explain it based upon this thing, but we're just going to say it's an emergent property. I actually reject emergent properties. I'm a type physicalist when it comes to the mind. I believe that the mind is reducible to the physical. We just haven't been able to fully explain all psychological states from the physical components. And I think everything is reducible to bosons and fermions. But that is a ontological position I have, and not an epistemological position that I have. So I don't know how. I just believe that can explain everything.
I see your argument from your perspective, Ozian, as the most logical. I've been interested to notice how many atheists don't agree with you. I thought a lot would agree with you, and I don't think a lot do. Whereas I think what you're saying makes complete sense. You know, fits all well nicely together.
Well, yeah, type physicalism. I like type physicalism, and you get problems with identity and morality trying to justify those positions. So I just say, and Leo's better, I think, at bridging this gap than I am. Thank you, Siggy, for another 10 subs. Channel memberships, I mean, thank you so much. Yeah, everybody gets a membership today. Thanks, bud. Yeah, it's just because a lot of people want to know. They want it to know it's true, to explain everything, to hold a belief. And I understand where they're coming from, but you do have to have presuppositions to make any type of knowledge claim in the first place. So I just presuppose everything's physical. Oh, I was explaining, so you do have problems with identity, because what does it mean to be a thing like that identity if everything is reducible down to bosons, like the whatever the most fundamental particle is in reality? How do you justify my identity? And I think I do that. You read my book. I try to explain that in my book.
You still have to send me a copy, brother. I need to read it.
I can't find my book, and I'm poor right now. I'm less poor with the $5 and all the memberships. But
I listen to it on Audible, so if you're an Audible guy, go get it, go buy it, support the man.
Yeah, of course I'll support the man. No problem. Yeah, I find it's kind of shocking when we saw the two different kind of perspectives. I was like, this is unbelievable. But it might be fun. I think this debate could be really fun.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
I want to mute my alert box there.
The part this is getting a little personal as a pastor. If Rob does poorly on the arguments, or he's not well prepared and doesn't do well, that's fine. Maybe he's not a good debater or whatever. But I really hope he's nice. You know what I mean? Like that I think sometimes bothers me as much as anything else. It's like, well, what good is all this supposed arguing if you don't end up being able to treat people really well? So based on his video, I'm nervous that won't be the case. And sometimes people are really nice in person, but online they get, they're kind of different or whatever. So anyway, I hope he's is kind and demonstrates that here. Because I always just feel like slightly embarrassed when that doesn't happen.
I totally feel you, Dr. J. I think character is a big thing. Like, that was one of the most shocking things that I saw, like, particularly with a lot of Muslim debaters. I'm like, can't you, like, treat people well? And I was really sad, even with that Matt Dillahunty, what was his name? Andrew? I was like, you can act better than this. we're having a debate. We're adults. We don't have to like do lowbrow stuff. And especially if you're claiming to believe in theology and stuff, you should have, like, you would expect that there would be some kind of character in check. But I'm actually really shocked to see that it's not there at a lot of times.
Yeah. I think this is important. Real psychness, like he was talking about, there's a hard problem with consciousness where we can't explain consciousness from physical things yet. Well, I believe it's possible. Anyways. Kentucky Atheist says, Steve is going to destroy this guy. The only question is, which direction will his rhetoric go? I think he's going to stick to epistemology and arguments for atheism. But you guys said, I hope he's nice. Like, I don't know. I didn't follow him on Twitter, but I saw him a lot in my Twitter feed, and he ended up blocking me. He says some stuff that, like, I don't think is, like, true. Anyways, but basically calling atheists stupid and stuff like that.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, obviously, your personal experience with them and the short little clips we've watched, that's not the impression we're getting. So I'm not saying that's likely or what you've experienced. I'm just hoping that's what happens here in the future.
Right.
And I hope there's a good representation of atheism. A lot of the time, it's like very sad. Like, I've seen this on the theist side, just to be quite honest, that theists don't understand atheism and they don't represent it well, and they just make it seem like a bunch of hedonists, and I'm like, that's not what atheism is, It's like some kind of like chick, I don't know if you know who that is, but he made these comic books that were like kind of insanity, and that's the kind of depiction that we see of atheists. So I hope that doesn't happen tonight, but...
Yeah, and Siggy brings up, even when we talk about knowledge, we're really saying, I believe this to be true. That's true. But knowledge is supposed to be, I don't think, like the traditional justified true belief, knowledge is necessarily possible for everything. Maybe it's not possible for anything, even solipsism. I just presuppose certain things are true and I hold them as absolutely true. But I think there's what's called pragmatic naturalism, and I appeal to people to look up papers that have been written in philosophy on pragmatic naturalism, which appeals to justified true belief plus pragmatism. So there's two different other types of plus JTBs, which is luck based upon epistemic luck. So you just got to the truth by luck, or you just accepting the claim is true through pragmatic reasons. And I believe like holding that scientific claims are true through pragmatism is a justified belief. But so yeah, you're right. So knowledge is a subset of belief. Belief is something to hold to be true. So a justified true belief is something that you hold to be true that is in fact objectively true. And with that, just show notes. As soon as the debate starts, it will redirect and I'll end the stream. It's scheduled to go in like 3 minutes now. Debates are not always on time because you have multiple participants. We'll see how it goes. Maybe Steve will be early. Maybe they'll be better than modern day debate in that regard. I'm not sure. We'll see how people like it. You have something to say, Tyler?
Yeah, just really quick, because we were talking about that debate with Matt Dillahunty and that Andrew Feller from the Crucible, and I had mixed feelings about that at the time. But then when James said like MDD isn't your grandmother's debate channel, that kind of really got my mind reeling, because I've seen like those Oxford debates, which are far more structured, and MDD, there's this really great phenomenon that happens where if one side kind of barely shows up, sometimes the super chats will kick in and really hold their feet to the flames, like what happened with a very recent debate between a Muslim and someone. I think that was Nadir's last debate, and we've seen that a couple of other times, like what happened in Austin when Matt left the stage and the audience kind of stepped up to the microphone and kind of called him on his behavior, and that's something that MDD does very well with the audience engagement, that kind of makes up for any shortcomings on the part of the debaters. And so it's something that I've certainly I was kind of reluctant to accept it at first because I do appreciate structured debate in my own community, but seeing that audience engagement kind of make up for the lack of structure or like stern structure and MDD, it's certainly something that I greatly appreciate now, and so I hope that the super chats and the audience don't let anybody on either side get away with it. And when we see those debates like what we recently had, where there was like 3 hours worth of Q&A, that's just fantastic. And I love seeing those engagements go on, and it really is a great platform, especially when we see those debates kind of flop, and then we come here to this channel, Matters Now, and have a far more in-depth, civilized conversation where we go from calling ourselves pimp on a blimp to having an actual conversation that actually has merit, and points actually get made and rebutted and rebuked, and it goes back and forth. There's a civilized exchange, and it's not just egos and face flapping. So I really appreciate that about this whole MDD and Matters Now format.
Thank you. We're trying to do that. And speaking of Nadir, I have a debate on February 4th with Nadir. The topic will be, is the Quran scientific? Expect me to take a much different approach than you've seen other atheists take to that debate. I think, with that, the show's starting. So I want to end the stream. Thank you so much for everybody for coming. All the panelists. The after show will be probably 2 hours or so. We'll see, judge it by ear, but this should automatically redirect you. And I will post a link in the description or in the live chat. And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.